Hi, this is Heidi Almustakim with Durham Public Schools, and I'm going to be sharing with you the resources that we have available here in DPS for getting Poetry Out Loud started up in your classroom. The first resource I want to share is the County Poetry Out Loud page on our DPS 912english.wikispaces.com site. Hopefully you can see up here in the address bar. That's the address for our Poetry Out Loud page on our Wikispaces. There's basic information here about the contest in general. There's information about the national, state, and district Poetry Out Loud programs. There's a timeline for our Poetry Out Loud program here in Durham Public Schools. School winners have to be submitted using this form that's linked right here by January 30th. And this year's competition will be held on February 8th at 2017 at 6 p.m. I'm finalizing venue details right now. And as soon as that venue information is confirmed, I'll be posting that here on this website. I'll also let all of our Durham County school coordinators know the final details of the competition venue as soon as that becomes finalized. So there's lots of resources and information available right there on that site. The next thing that I'm going to share with you are the resources that are available through our Google Docs, or our Google Drive documents. So there's a lesson, kind of a startup lesson, that helps teachers get through the initial process of students picking, analyzing, and beginning to memorize a poem and then reciting it. There's a student-facing version, which is called Poetry, Recitation, and Performance Assignment. And then the teacher copy of that just kind of has some color-coded notations about the time frames for each step included in this student-facing assignment. I'm going to go ahead and click on the student-facing assignment first. If you take a look at this assignment, it's designed to be mostly student-centered work, so it's not a worksheet. It's a list of directions, tips, and links. So you can see here that it's only one page long, but it includes a lot. The first portion just gives the student outcomes for this assignment. This is not a one-night assignment. This is a process that takes time for students to complete, and there's really kind of 4 steps in this process. The first is the poem selection step. There are several different ways that teachers or school coordinators can have their students select a poem, but all poems for the competition have to come from the Poetry Out Loud anthology, which is linked right there. And if you look at the anthology, you can look by poem title or by poets. So if you have kids that do have an affinity or want to choose a poem by a poet that they're familiar with, then they can look by poet right here. For my advice, get students to select a poem as soon as possible. Get this information, even if you just give this information out to students. Maybe you send it to an email, or you link it on their website, or you give them the whole assignment page entirely and say, look, you've got to have your poem selected from this online anthology by this date. Give them a few days so that they can go through and look at the poets and look at the poems that are available to choose one. Now, for the Poetry Out Loud competition, they have to do 2 poems. And there are some requirements for those. One poem has to be 25 lines or less, and the other poem has to be from I gotta look up the date and I'll tell you what it is right here. This is the student winner Google form. And so one of the poems has to be pre-20th century, and one of the poems has to be 25 lines or fewer. For your classroom or school competition, you can have them do one of those. One poem can meet both of those requirements, but for the classroom and school competitions, I would go ahead and just have them do one poem and prepare the second one for the competition. You can have one poem that is pre-20th century and 25 lines or fewer, and then it would meet both of them. Okay, and then the second poem for that student would not have to meet either. Okay. So get kids choosing their poem as soon as possible. Maybe give them the link on a Friday and let them peruse and give them till Tuesday or Wednesday to have their poem selected. You can also go through the poems and say, according to the course, if you're doing this through a classroom assignment, you can do it according to your course. Here are the poets from which you can choose, or you can go through and pick a number of poems for them that are appropriate for the assignment. It's up to you. You're the leader in your classroom, so you decide what's best for your kids. So that's the first thing, and that takes some time for kids for selecting a poem. The next part is kind of the English classroom part of this assignment. This is the poetry analysis. And for the poetry analysis, this isn't anything revolutionary or new, but it does tie directly in with close reading and analysis of a poem. And so the linked assignment there, so when you give this to kids and you give it to them electronically, they can just click on there and it'll take them right to this sheet. You can also print it out and give it to them. So this is a graphic organizer that takes the students through soapstone with the poem. So they have to identify and give textual evidence for the speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, subject, and tone of the poem. And then they have to give, I call it show me, so what? So they give the textual evidence, they show me in the text where that is, and then they explain the significance or importance of how that textual evidence proves that that is the identified speaker or that is the identified occasion. This provides a very kind of concrete way for students to begin to pull apart and think about different aspects of the poem. It's a great analysis tool, and it's also a great pre-writing tool if you're going to have students do a written analysis, which could definitely be a part of this assignment. It's not here, but you can add that if you like. And so as they do the poetry analysis, they're also starting to make annotations on their copy of the poem. Annotations to indicate specific ways they'll use tone, rhythm, volume, and speed to convey the poem's meaning. Students will not be able to convey that they understand the meaning of the poem unless they've done some pretty heavy analysis. In this assignment, there is a link to Poetry Out Loud poems and performances. And so students can actually listen to exemplar readings and recitations of some really amazing poems from the poetry anthology. So they don't have to just go, what should it sound like? Here are really, really great examples of conveying meaning using your voice. And if you look, there's some really, really great voices reading. So Angela Lansbury reading Wordsworth, Alfred Molina reading Dylan Thomas. This is one of my favorite recordings on the site. And one of them, oh, there we go. See, Anthony Hopkins reading The Lake Isle of Innisfree. Oh my gosh, that's amazing too. So they have lots of really great resources right here. Tons and tons and tons of recordings so that they can hear how poetry is used, how the words of poetry can be used in a performance. A really great addition to this assignment, this is their assignment, and you can help them through that. If you take one of the poems from the anthology, let's say, we're going to go, do not go gentle into that good night. Maybe Lake Isle of Innisfree. So let's say, okay, as a class, you can go through show them the whole poem, Lake Isle of Innisfree. You can read it. You can do soapstone together as a class for Lake Isle of Innisfree, or whichever poem you choose. Then, as they start to think about reciting this poem, how can they mark it up for recitation? So you can go right here, Anthony Hopkins, Sir Anthony Hopkins, and you can play.
It seems to me that there's a lot you can do when you're performing poems. There's a lot of range you can have.
And so it gives some introduction to
for a while, for a few readings, and decide for yourself if it's a quiet poem, or if it's a boisterous poem, or if it's a fast poem, or if it's a slow poem. And something of that is written into the poem itself. For example, there's a famous poem by William Butler Yeats called The Lake Isle of Innisfree, or Innisfree, as some Irish people say. And it always seemed to me that whatever else you can say about this poem, it's not a loud, boisterous poem. It's probably a quieter poem. So when you try to say it, you might want to say it with some sense of the quietness of the language.
Now the actor Anthony Hopkins reading The Lake Isle of Innisfree.
I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin built there of clay and bottles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's grey, I hear it in the deep heart's core.
And so you can definitely work this into direct instruction in the classroom. You've got the full text of the poem. You've got some amazing readings of the poem. And you can work on analyzing the poem, the actual text of the poem, and then annotating this poem for how it would be read based on that analysis. And you can take these professional, amazing readings and say, okay, how would we annotate this actual text to indicate how we just heard it? And then that shows them, it gives them an exemplar for how to use voice, tone, speed, volume, and enunciation to help display understanding or convey understanding of the poem. But it also helps them to learn how to mark up a text so that they can give that performance that they want to give. So those are great resources available. Part of this poetry analysis is that they're going to share their poem. They're going to read their poem aloud with the annotations, and also to share that analysis with a classmate. So that they've got the work to do alone, and then they've got to share that with a classmate, maybe before they turn the analysis in, or however you want to schedule those parts of the assignment to come due. So after they've selected a poem, and then they've analyzed the poem, and started to make annotations that analyzed it not just for meaning, but for how to best recite it, shared it with a partner, then they start to memorize it. And there are some different ways to memorize different things. Handwriting has been shown to help with memorization and remembering, but also just kind of making a habit of reading it aloud, carrying it around with you. Number 4, I think, is the big one for kids today. They can use their phone to record themselves reading the poem. And they can do this with an actual written copy in front of them with all of the annotations for how they want to perform it. And so when they record it exactly the way that it's written and exactly the way they want to perform the words that are written, they've got an exact performance that they think is the best way to perform it. And they can listen to it over and over and over again. This is how they know all the words to the hundreds of songs that are on the radio or that they've heard, is that they hear it again and again and again and again. So if they've chosen their own poem, they've dug into it for meaning, about how they think it should sound, record it on their phone, and then they've got a really great tool to aid in their memorization. We also want to make sure that they're practicing their poem from memory with another person at least once a day. And then the last part is the actual recitation. When I did this with students, I never made one final recitation the only recitation grade. I always had 4 steps. I had students record. Back in the day, I wasn't recording on their phone. I had one of those little cassette recorders like a psychologist or I guess police detective might have, and we would record them. I would use cassette tapes over and over again. As technology improved or advanced, we would do digital recordings and I would email them to them. But anyways, some kind of recording with those full recitation dramatics. And they could submit that to you however you choose. The thing about the recording is they only need to send you the one that's the best. So if they make a really great recording on their phone that they're going to listen to again and again because it's the way they want it, they can send that one to you. And you're going to use the evaluation sheet to evaluate for their performance of the recitation. And I'll talk a couple of minutes about those in a little bit. A one-on-one recitation with you. So they've got a recording that they think is appropriate, a one-on-one recitation from memory with you, a practice recitation with a partner, and then the recitation for the final evaluation. And you can decide how to weigh them, which way it's, how it's going to be weighted or graded, or maybe one will be a final project grade or 2 together. You have to decide kind of how to weight that or how to use that. But I would urge you not to have one recitation be the only recitation grade that counts heavy for this. So in the Poetry Out Loud competition, there are 2 kinds of evaluation. One is for accuracy, and that's simply based on the accuracy with which they recite the poem. It's a pretty detailed process of listening. There's a separate judge dedicated to accuracy. And the guidelines for how points are deducted is listed here on the accuracy sheet. The most they can get is 8 points. And then there's different things at different volumes or different values. Then the next evaluation sheet is for the actual performance. And so on the contest evaluation sheet, there are 5 kind of facets to a recitation of a poem that are being judged. And take you back. That's not it. I'm going to take you back and I'm going to click on that teacher's guide because I want to show you the great resource that they have available there. So on the wiki, one of the links here is the Poetry Out Loud Teacher's Guide. And in this teacher's guide, I think it's on page 18. I think it's actually page 20. It's page 18. I was right. No. There is a whole section. Oh, there we go. There's a whole section of the evaluation criteria and tips for contestants. You can make this link available to your students as well. You can also kind of use these as talking notes as you're working with students through this, the processes in this assignment. So the physical presence, it gives the advice, and then it gives the qualities. Voice and articulation, it goes through each one of those categories on the evaluation rubric, the contest evaluation sheet, and then a total. Okay. So there's another set of recordings. So if you go to the Poetry Out Loud site, which is linked on the wiki, right up at the top in that little introduction, that's a link to the Poetry Out Loud site. And there is a list Let's see. There's a set of videos. There's a set of videos, and they're annotated, learning recitation of a poem. And if you go to this, you'll see the poems. But here's what makes them really great. These are actual student performances from Poetry Out Loud competitions first. So this is what the competition looks like. And in this video, you'll see the student reading whatever poem they're reading, but then the Poetry Out Loud folks have used the poem, the performance, and the evaluation criteria and kind of given why this poem is so strong for dramatic appropriateness. Why this poem, this performance of this poem is so amazing for voice and articulation. Why this poem's performance by this student is really amazing for physical presence and voice and articulation. Why this reading is great for evidence of understanding. So there are tons of resources, not just on, well, they're linked here on our wiki spaces, but on the Poetry Out Loud site itself. And so that is kind of the startup assignment for getting students up and running in Poetry Out Loud. Okay. If you have any questions, you can contact me by commenting on this video. You can also email me at heidi.almustakim@dpsnc.net. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks. Bye-bye.